Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Today I'm going to talk about sort of the political spectrum, or at least the spiritual nature of it. Well, maybe not. But I'd like to look at things from a longer time scale perspective. I like to take into consideration all of human history and all of the cultures of the world and analyze politics based on a very long time scale and a very multipolar viewpoint. Whereas when most people think about politics and want to talk about left and right and all of that, they think on a very short term time scale, maybe 50 years, whereas I think about thousands of years of history. So I think to calibrate this discussion, we need to just first talk about what centrism is. What is the center of the political spectrum? And essentially, it would be like a centrist form of government would be Plato's republic, his ideal state, Plato's ideal state, which is basically a representative form of government, but nobody has any voting rights. So maybe there's a group of people with similar goals, similar needs, a similar shared history, a similar culture. They would select through meritocracy a representative. And so you have these different groups of people with different representatives, and they belong to a senate, and they discuss issues, and they write laws to help organize their society. And proposals for new laws are not voted on because even the senators don't have voting rights. Consensus has to be built, and a law can only be passed if there is a unanimous vote for it. Even if there is one detracting senator, the policy will not be passed, and it has to go back to the drawing board and reconfigured and reworked until everyone agrees with it. And so, of course, this can take weeks, months, or years before a law is even passed. And a centrist form of government is inefficient, according to the modern term, meaning very slow moving. And that is essentially a centrist form of government. And there's a king in Plato's Republic. There is a king, a guy who has veto power, essentially. And this is a centrist form of government. So a king and no voting rights is in the center of the political spectrum when you take into account all of human history, every type of civilization we've ever had, from hunter-gatherers and subsistence living people all the way up to the most sophisticated city-states. And everything in between. If you analyze all of it, you'll realize that Plato's Republic is right there in the center, almost exact center. But today, the Overton window has been pushed so far to the left that anything to the right of socialist is considered far right. Now, the Overton window is what is socially acceptable at any given time. So sometimes the Overton window gets pushed far to the right. Sometimes the Overton window gets pushed far to the left. Sometimes it's in the middle. But regardless, there is a socially acceptable range of political beliefs that people will not be ostracized for having. So if you fall within that range of political beliefs from left to right, and nobody argues with you, nobody yells at you, then you're within the Overton window. And it moves on the political spectrum from left to right, meaning there is always something excluded from it. Things, views that are too extreme outside of the Overton window, and they will be socially unacceptable. You'll be ostracized or penalized or argued with if you have views that are outside of this window. And the Overton window got pushed to the left in the 18th century, arguably in the 14th century, but we can track it back to when the Freemasons published their constitutions, and the Overton window started moving to the left. And now it is very, very, very far to the left, to the point where people who call themselves conservatives in Western civilization, in Europe and in America, are actually leftists. Because, remember, in the centrist form of government, nobody has any voting rights. So anybody who believes in voting rights is automatically to the left of center. Voting rights is a very liberal form of legal framework. So anybody who believes in voting rights is already to the left of center, already to the left of Plato's Republic. So you technically cannot be a conservative and believe in voting rights, yet we have a few billion so-called conservatives in the world, maybe a few 100 million, or I don't know how many in the Western world, who call themselves conservatives, and they're not. They're classical liberals. They believe in freedom of speech, capitalism, and the acquisition of private property and personal wealth, as opposed to acquiring wealth for the king, or opposed to stewardship for the land, for the kingdom. It's stewardship for the land that I bought for myself. You know, it's collection of private property, collection of personal property and wealth, and no longer do we earn money on behalf of the king. We don't like to think that the money belongs to the king or to the Federal Reserve Bank in today's world, the central bank. We like to think that the money is ours. We believe it is our money. Whereas in the past, in a feudalistic civilization, the money belonged to the king, and we were simply allowed to use it. There was no such thing as private property. The money we had, all of the land, it belonged to the king. The king was the land was the king. These were not separate ideas. The king literally was the land, was the nation. There was no separation. There was a mystical conjunction, a mystical meshing, a merging between the king and the land. And of course, money comes from the land. Money is only worth however good your land is in a feudal system. If you have good land that's bountiful and natural and clean and beautiful and arable, then your money is worth a lot. And in a kingdom where you couldn't grow a lot of food, it wasn't very arable, maybe there were droughts, maybe there were illnesses and diseases, then your money was worth less. And that's how inflation and deflation worked in a feudal system. It was based on land stewardship, and the king was the land, therefore the king is the money. And so a conservative would believe in that type of economic system. But today's conservatives believe in capitalism. They think that's a conservative system, when in fact it's a liberal system. It was invented by the English in around the 18th or 19th century because of the liberalization of the governmental system, which led to the liberalization of the economic system. And this idea of personal freedom and individualism is where capitalism came from. And then democracy came from capitalism. So capitalism is a leftist system. Now, the Overton Window says capitalism is a far-right system. The Overton Window today says that capitalism is a far-right system and communism is a far-left system. So the Overton Window is so far to the left that capitalism, being still on the left, is considered far-right. So the far-right is not even in the center of the actual spectrum. It's far-right on the Overton Window, but it's left of center on the actual political spectrum. So this means that anyone who has centrist views has socially unacceptable views that are too far right. Because I could say something like, I'm a centrist. And what does that mean? In today's world, being a centrist essentially means you're a social democrat, because that's how far left the Overton Window is. People say, oh, I'm a centrist, and they believe in both conservative and liberal values. What they mean is they believe in both classical liberal and communist values, because it got pushed to the left. And so they're a social democrat, slightly to the right of socialist. And that's what most people mean when they say that they're a centrist today. But that is not what a centrist is. If I went up to you and said, I believe we should have a monarch, I don't believe in voting rights, I believe in meritocracy, and I believe in consensus building, people would flip a lid and tell me that I'm far right, when in fact I am a centrist. This is where the state of discourse is today. So imagine people who are actually on the right, people who believe in autocracy, people who want to reestablish the Tsar in Russia, or people who want to establish an imperium in the Western world. That would be basically center-right. It would be to the right of center, and on the entire right side of the political spectrum, it'd be in the center. If you believe in the imperium, if you believe in the czar, if you believe in autocracy, that's about center right. Pretty far right to the center, but not very far right. In the grand, what I consider to be the true historical political window, political spectrum, someone who believes in autocracy is center right. But today, if you say you believe in autocracy, like, you're not even on the political spectrum. People just think you're insane because you are so far to the right of the Overton window that people think you have some form of psychosis. They think it's insert year here. How can you possibly believe in that? We don't do that anymore. We've evolved beyond that. We've progressed beyond that, as though you can progress beyond certain types of politics. And that's another aspect of everything that's on the left, is the idea of progressivism and evolutionism, that things change over time and that humans make them better over time. That's a leftist belief, yet conservatives believe this too. Well, people who call themselves conservatives, today modern Western conservatives, they believe, we can work to make things better and stuff like that, or things change, and, the left wants progress in this direction, and the right, the so-called right, wants progress in that direction. And conservatism, true conservatism, doesn't care whether things progress or not. Some things can, and some things don't. But true conservatism doesn't think in terms of progress or regress. And a common criticism against right-wingers or conservatives is that they want everything to stay the same. And this is where modern conservatives go wrong, is because, they are trying to capture some earlier form of liberalism, maybe from the 1950s or 1940s, and they want to just keep the world in that political state. And they think that conservatism means to conserve a particular form of government that they have an affinity for, that they enjoyed, that they think worked for them. But usually they're wrong. Usually it's a romanticized vision of the past. It's generally incorrect. It's generally a form of propaganda. Some things definitely were better in the past, sure, but not everything was that great. And people think conservatism is conserving a past period forever, when true conservatism is actually conserving your own soul. And you can conserve your own soul, your own spirit, whether there's progress and things changing and evolving, or whether things are staying the same. It literally doesn't matter to your spirit, because your spirit is not touched by this world. It's not touched by the wheel of fortune, the wheel of dharma, the wheel of the world. Time and the world spin on, and things change, things evolve, things progress, things regress. Wars happen, peace happens, abundance happens, scarcity happens, prosperity happens, depressions happen, civilizations are built and civilizations die, people are born and people die, and everything's constantly changing in this world. And that's just the way the world is. To be a conservative is to conserve your spirit, and so that your spirit is not affected by these changes. So you're not trying to, so as the wheel of fortune turns, today's conservatives would be like, I liked this part of the wheel at this particular time, and I just want to hold on to that and keep this part of the wheel. But the wheel's going to turn anyway. There's nothing you can do about the fact that that part of the wheel is going to get crushed by time. And so a conservative trying to conserve a particular moment in history is an idiot. And that's why modern conservatives utterly fail at gaining any sort of traction or any sort of power against the modern left, because a lot of them they lack a real foundation. They lack a real traditional foundation. The only ones that have a good traditional foundation are the Christians, and I'm not going to criticize them too much, but they've lost their way, in my opinion. They're all over the place. They can't unite. They're extremely just arrogant and ignorant of other people and other ways of thinking. That a group like that is so close-minded and thinks that they have a monopoly on the one truth of reality will never succeed. It's just not going to work. They'll have minor successes, and they'll be a bastion of safety for some people, I think. People who like that type of religious tradition, who it fits with them, it vibes with them. They can find safe haven within the tradition of Christianity, but that's only going to work for certain people. It's not going to affect society at large. It's not going to really have any political sway except in small amounts and in certain cultures. But by and large, Christianity will basically just divide itself off from the rest of the West. And, it might succeed, it might fail, but it's just one of the solar religions that have always existed, like Mithraism and the religion of Tammuz and all the other solar religions, Isis of the Celts, and there's always a solar religion that exists and divides itself off from the rest of civilization eventually, and then a new civilization is born. That old solar religion gets forgotten, and then a replacement solar religion is born, which is really the exact same religion. It will just wear a different mask and use different names. And that's fine, because that's part of the messianic cycle, is just surviving the collapse of a civilization. And they're going to conserve themselves in that way, and they'll be the most successful conservatives in the Western world. Because nobody else has any tradition at all. Most conservatives look for some sort of political solution like fascism or Nazism or nationalism or libertarianism or capitalism or something. They think one of the isms is going to save them. They think if they just apply certain types of laws or whatever, and they're all missing the boat. They're all missing the fact that it's about conserving your soul. So Christians have the best chance of conserving their own souls and spirits in today's world. Of course, the real people who are truly going to succeed are like occultists and esotericists, spiritual practitioners who have seen beyond the exoteric aspects of religion and into the esoteric aspects and really understand the science of the soul and the science of history, the cycles of time. And they're the ones who will know how to basically ride the tiger, as Julius Evola calls it, of a collapsing civilization and not get mauled by the tiger. Whereas most conservatives are going to just collapse with their civilization. And that's the other aspect of right and left, is that a right-wing attitude is what is necessary to develop a civilization. And then at the peak of the development of a civilization, everything is prosperous and safe and orderly. That's when people start to criticize that civilization. That's what the left does. It destroys and criticizes, and then a civilization collapses. So when a civilization wants to be built, it has to utilize right-wing principles, right-wing attitudes, right-wing values to establish borders around a nation, to use war and force of arms to establish itself, to have strict laws, to create safety and order, and to have a strong king and a centralized economic system to create prosperity. And there's a lot of severity that goes along with this. There are certain groups of people that will be oppressed or even exterminated or kicked out, certain types of behavior that will be repressed and outlawed and things like that. And in a healthy and normal civilization, that will be fine to repress certain types of behavior. Like if you want to build a civilization, you have to write laws that say don't murder each other, don't rape each other, don't steal from each other. And people who do these things have to be punished very severely to set an example. And then once that civilization is established, perhaps over centuries or something like that, it achieves its peak. And then people forget why these laws are so strict, because at the peak of a civilization, that civilization is going to be pretty prosperous, pretty orderly, pretty safe. And people will forget, why do we have such strict laws? Everything's so safe and orderly. Why do we need these strict laws? And then you get people criticizing the laws. You get critical theory and deconstructionism. People who want to deconstruct the law. They deconstruct colonialism, or today they deconstruct whiteness. And it's right there in their language that they are destructive, deconstructive, critical. They just criticize and deconstruct and destroy that which has been built by right-wingers. Because they forgot, these laws seem pretty strict. It's pretty oppressive. This limits my freedom. I don't like it. Let's criticize it, deconstruct it, destroy it so that I can have more freedom for myself. And then this is when you start to lose your civilization, is because we forgot why the laws were so strict. We forgot why these traditions were put in place. Now, my definition of a tradition is a solution that always works for a problem that is always there. And if the solution works really well, it becomes a tradition. And if it works too well, the problem essentially gets eradicated, so long as you adhere to the tradition. And then over generations of time, generation after generation, people forget what the problem was, because the problem is gone. The problem's been gone maybe for centuries, and people forgot what the original problem was, so they think, why do we need this tradition? This tradition is outdated and stupid. This tradition stifles my freedom. This tradition doesn't allow me to do what I want to do. Why do we have this tradition? I don't need it. And then we start criticizing, deconstructing, and destroying the traditions through leftist ideology. That leftist ideology is a desire for personal freedom. And then they get rid of the tradition, maybe successfully, and then look what happens. Oh, the problem shows up again. The degeneracy, the barbarism, the disorderliness, or whatever that tradition solved starts to come back. And then people start to remember, oh, right, that's why we had that tradition. And now if you wish to reestablish that tradition, it's an uphill battle. Basically, the genie's out of the bottle. The disorder has already taken root. To reestablish a tradition that was just destroyed is essentially impossible. At least in my study of history, no civilization has ever succeeded. They'll succeed for a time, maybe up to 90 years of reestablishing a tradition before it's swept away completely again, with what people are today referring to as Caesarism. When a civilization is collapsing and moving further and further to the left, further toward democracy and anarchy and barbarism and disorderliness and degeneracy and bad behavior, someone will get pissed off and will try to reestablish the traditions, and this will be like someone like a Julius Caesar, and they'll be successful for a time. They might establish a new empire or a new imperium, have some orderliness and civilization for maybe 90 years, 120 years, maybe even 200 years, something like that. And then after that, the civilization collapses anyway. It goes back to, even after this revitalization of the tradition and conservatism, it just like dies anyway. That conservatism and revitalization just suddenly disappears. It quickly degenerates back into barbarism, democracy, and leftism, and the civilization gets wiped away anyway. It's like people who are terminally ill, and then they're ill for weeks, months, maybe even years, bedridden, can't eat, constantly in pain. You know, everyone thinks they're going to die the next day. You know, they're just terminally ill, really bad shape. And then one day they wake up and they're full of life and energy, right? They're like, oh, I feel great. And they get the family together and their friends are like, let's go out for ice cream and burgers, and this is the best day ever. Let's go see a baseball game. Oh my God, I feel great. It's like my disease has been cured. This is wonderful. And they have a great day. And then the next day they die. This happens all the time. Terminally ill people always have that one last day of complete energy and vitality, and then the next day they die anyway. That's Caesarism. That's when the right reestablishes itself on top of a collapsing civilization. And they think, oh, we've had victory. Oh, Caesar and Augustus established the new imperium. You know, we had the dictator of Caesar who paved the way for the imperium of Augustus, who then had generations of emperors for like 130 years. Or something like that, 160 years. But the Roman Empire died anyway. After, around 200 AD, the imperium died. They tried to reestablish republican values, and then mass immigration occurred, and it was it. It was the end. So that Caesarism, that couple centuries of Caesarism, was like that last great day of vitality that a terminally ill patient has. And that's what we'll see in the West, again, I'm sure, in our modern civilization. We'll get our Julius Caesar. He'll probably cross the Potomac one day in the 2030s or something, maybe the 2050s. And people will think, oh, this is great. We'll have 150 years of reestablishing Western tradition. Maybe some chivalric order will appear, some chivalric fraternal order of the police and of military officers, and people will think, oh, this is great. But after that, by the 23rd, 24th century, it's going to be all over. It's going to be lights out for the West anyway, because conservatism is misunderstood, and civilizations live and die just like any other organism. And it's essentially, you can't just keep an organism alive on life support through trying to reestablish traditions. It doesn't work. What you have to do is just let your civilization die and just build a new civilization with new conservative or traditional values, which are basically the same as the old ones, but you don't try to recapture a period of bygone history. You understand you're moving into the future. You establish new traditions, which are rooted in the old traditions, but you got to do it in a new way, and you have to adapt to the life that you're in, the culture that you're in, the race that you're in, the civilization that you're building. And you just build a new civilization based on right-wing values and attitudes, and you go up to that peak, and you just hope for the best, but you understand that after that peak, leftism takes hold and everything gets destroyed anyway, just the same way as after you're 45 years old, you get old and you start to get weak and die. That's just the way it is. That's life. And to get angry about that is counterproductive and stupid. That's another reason why leftists and right-wingers constantly fail, because they're just angry about everything not going their way. They're just pissed off all the time because they don't focus on themselves, the quality of their spirit. Because the world is always going to change, your civilization's always going to die. What's important is that your soul, your spirit, is not affected by these changes. That as the wheel of fortune turns, you stay in the center, in the hub of the wheel that doesn't turn. The hub is just an empty space where the axle goes. The hub is nothing. The hub is nothingness. It doesn't spin, it's not affected by the rim of the wheel. You got to get as close, you got to climb through the spokes of the wheel to that center, to that hub. That's the spiritual journey. Get out of the rim of the wheel, go to the hub of the wheel, where nothing spins, nothing changes. That's eternity, that's the spirit, that's God, that's the soul, the absolute, whatever. The essence of reality, the foundation, Shiva. That's where, that's true conservatism, is to conserve that aspect of reality and to adhere to that aspect of reality which is not affected by the wheel of fortune, by the wheel of time. But today's conservatives, they're on the rim of the wheel, and they're going to get smushed, they're going to get crushed under the wheel of fortune, under the wheel of time, just like the leftists and liberals will and everybody else will. It has no spiritual foundation. That's why Mussolini's fascism and Hitler's Nazism failed, because they were just industrial capitalist governments with fascist leanings. They had no spiritual foundation whatsoever. They pretended to, because it was good propaganda. At least the Nazis pretended to, because the only way you can get people behind you in good conscience is to appeal to religious and spiritual aspects of the human being, because that makes them feel good. So anything that seemed spiritual coming from the Nazis was really just propaganda. The Vril and Thule societies talking about esotericism and trying to reestablish Nordic paganism and all that sort of stuff. That was just a way to trick people into following this new government, because the essence of that government was just industrialism and capitalism and machinery and written law and legalism. Same thing with Mussolini's fascism. He didn't even pretend to have spiritual foundations. It was just trying to resurrect Rome without any of the spirit or soul of Rome. Just like the legalistic aspects of it, the industrialistic aspects of it, the feudalistic aspects of it, but none of the spiritual aspects of it. And that's why these movements failed. And it's why modern conservatism will fail and fail again, because it has no spiritual aspect to it. But that's not to say all conservative movements will fail. It's like the Christian movement. They will simply divide off from the failing civilization, and they might succeed in staying in the hub of the wheel as the wheel turns. These other conservative movements that have a true spiritual foundation will be protected from the turning wheel. At least the individuals within them will be protected from the turning wheel. And that'll be it. Those people will probably become the seeds of new civilizations, but they will not rescue the West from death. A lot of them have this goal that they're going to restore the West or protect the West or save the West. It's not going to happen. That's like trying to keep someone alive who's on life support. Everybody dies. Every organism eventually dies. And that's what modern conservatives need to understand, is the West will die eventually. Every civilization has about a 2,000 year stay. Ours is over. It ended around now. You know, you get like plus or minus 300 years. So from the year 1700 to the year 2300, you know, we're in the middle of that plus or minus 300 years. And that's what you get. You get about 2,000 years, something like that. And you just have to accept that. So the real spiritual significance of conservatism is to just take care of the quality of your own soul, spirit, mind, and find the hub of the wheel so that you're not crushed under its rim as it turns, because you can't stop it from turning. And all the conservatives watching this, you need to understand you cannot stop the wheel from turning. And the left's job is to make the wheel turn even faster, and they almost always succeed. Every great civilization has the leftist movement that appears at its peak, begins criticizing and deconstructing, and then as that civilization naturally gets old and starts dying, the left kills it faster. The left is like cancer or a bacterial infection. It can't just, you know, the old man isn't just getting old and dying. He's getting old and then he gets sick. He gets an infection. He gets cancer, and then he dies even faster. Well, that's the left. They make it die. They make the organism die even faster, and they're almost always successful at accelerating the death of a civilization. And like, do you get angry at cancer? Do you get angry at bacteria? Like, what a waste of time and energy. Like, you're gonna get angry at a scorpion because it stung you. You're going to get angry at a hurricane because it blows houses down. These are just natural phenomena these things just happen. Like, to get angry at this stuff is such a waste of energy and such a waste of time. You know, like, when your grandfather is dying of cancer, are you angry at the cancer? That's so stupid. Like, no offense if you've gone through that. I know most people have gone through that experience where they just get angry. You know, the 5 stages of grief or whatever. Anger is one of them. You get angry at cancer, or you get angry at God for allowing it to happen, and all this just wasted energy. You're going to give yourself an ulcer. The more important thing is to plant seeds for a new culture. Focus on your legacy. What aspects of your life, of your soul, of your mind, of your ideas can survive the collapse of a civilization? What ideas of yours, what part of your spirit is rooted in the hub of the wheel and not on the rim, and not anywhere on the spoke either? Like, the closer you get to the rim, like, yeah, ideas get better and better. The quality of your soul gets better and more stable the closer you get to the hub. But even the spoke, it's still turning. Even things that are very close to the hub are still turning. You got to be in the hub. The perennial, permanent, eternal ideas. The perennial, permanent, eternal aspects of your soul. Find those. Use those as your legacy, as seeds to plant that will sprout into a new culture. And just let the Old West die. Who cares? Who cares? Like, yeah, chivalry was great and all that, and you can be inspired by these ideals, and you can have some of these ideals be the seeds that you plant for a new civilization, but you need to understand it's going to be a new civilization, not an old one. Real conservatism is not affected over much by what is old. It's not obsessed with what is old. You have to dig deeper. Why are conservatives obsessed with what is old? Oh, they're obsessed with what is stable. Well, what is truly stable? Your soul, your spirit. Old things are only stable in the romantic sense of our memory because our memories don't change. Therefore, old things seem stable. And you can confuse an old civilization with your own soul. That's why there's this romanticism about, oh, I want to preserve this aspect of the past. But you're projecting. What is truly stable is your spirit. What you want to conserve is your spirit. It doesn't matter what happened in the past. You can be inspired by those things, sure. But you're confusing a bygone era with your own soul. You're confusing the stability of a memory of an old thing with the stability of your own soul. You have to get deeper than the memory of an old thing. It's not the memory of the old thing that you want. It's not the old thing that you want. It's your spirit that is truly inspiring you. So dig from that eternal, unchangeable aspect of reality. And what comes from that is used as seeds to create a new civilization. That is the real essence of conservatism, and that is the only way conservatives will succeed. And they always do this. This is how civilizations are reborn after one dies, or new civilizations are born after one dies. And these seeds have already been planted in places around the world, if you know how to look for them. And they're growing. A lot of them are saplings. Some of them are even small trees. And these newer civilizations already exist. And the West is trying its best to destroy these saplings and small trees. So as a conservative, you can do your best to recognize a real new, conservatively rooted, traditionally rooted civilization that is rooted in spirit. And just support that, be inspired by that, instead of flailing around in anger and desperation trying to hold on to some unnecessary ideas from some bygone era. Anyway, that's my take on the political window. I hope it was useful for you. I hope it helped you reflect, but have a good day. See you next time.